Good afternoon. This is Bob Gorley speaking to Mel Lufsey. Mel Lufsey is from Pennsylvania, New Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. And this is podcast number 135, Bob's Truth Seekers. Mel, can you start by telling us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I'm currently 74 years old. I graduated high school. 5 days after I graduated high school, I went into the United States Army. A year spent some time at another place that's rather interesting to finish out my Army days, and then I worked at General Electric in Erie for about a year, and after that I became a truck driver, and I was a truck driver for 43 years.
And what was life like in New Bethlehem when you grew up?
Well, I grew up in back a distant from the time I was in 7th grade, and so for me it was, my mom was raising 6 kids on her own, and so we all did our part in raising each other while she worked.
Where did the Lufseys come from?
They originated from Hampton, Virginia.
Virginia, and what part of Europe then before they came here?
Well, we're of German and Irish descent, which, you know, the Germans like to pronounce it Lufsey, and of course it somewhere along the translation became Lufsey. It is a rare name, and if you find another one, we would definitely be related. In 1970, at the time I went into the Army, there were only 50 of us in the entire United States. That's how rare the name was then.
What prompted you to join the service?
Main reason I joined the service was we were still living in the age of the draft. I actually had a low draft number.
Do you remember what that number was?
It was less than 100. I don't remember the exact number, but it was less than 100. And of course they just did this lottery thing on TV, watched it get pulled on TV, and I knew that I would get drafted. So for 2 reasons, I went and talked to several recruiters. I was into sports in school, so I actually went to Katanning and interviewed with the Marine Corps, only because I liked their uniforms, and they would do basic training in Parris Island, and being into sports, I thought that I just wanted the satisfaction to say I survived Parris Island. But as I walked out of the room, the Army recruiter was right across, and as I walked out, he said, "Did you sign up yet?" And I said, "No, not yet." And he said, "Well, what are you good at?" And he said, "You know, if you enlist before you're drafted, we can guarantee you schools and training, and you tell me what interests you, and then maybe we'll have something for you that would suit you better."
How many years did you have to sign up for?
3.
3 years.
Yes, that was mandatory. You're actually making a 6-year commitment. That you sign a 6-year contract, but 3 years of that had to be active, and then you could become inactive reserve for the other 3. And if you went to Vietnam or other places, when you came back home, and after you got out of the Army, they would tell you, at the time there was Army engineers were in Brookville, and I went to one meeting, and as soon as I told them I was a Vietnam veteran, they said, "You don't have to do this." So basically my other 3 years of inactive reserve was inactive reserve, but I was active for 3 years, yes.
When you signed up with the Army, how long until you went to basic training, or how?
They had a program, because I went to them in about 3 months before I graduated, and they had a program called the 120-day delay program. And what that was is that would start counting the time of your 6-year contract, basically. And I did it because I just realized, I didn't want to be a burden to my mom, who was raising 6 kids. And the other reason was my brother and I had made a pact that we would go in together, even though he graduated a year ahead of me. And so I wanted to enlist and go in as soon as I could, because he was working at General Electric in Erie also. And well, no, I take it back. He was working for Rolla Jensen out of what is now the Max Distribution Building up here in Alcola. But unfortunately, he got hurt and got deferred. And so here I am, already signed up.
He got hurt working?
Mm-hmm. Smashed his hand in a stamping. And so he got deferred. And we were guaranteed, if we did it together, we were guaranteed to stay together through a lot of our assignments. And I was big brother, even though I was a year younger. And I just always felt I could take care of him and protect him. So
there's 6 of you guys. Where were you in the pecking order?
I was number 3. I have an older sister, then my brother, who was a year and 2 weeks older than me, and then myself. And then I had a younger brother. Those were the 4 Lufseys. And then there are 2 kids from Mom's second marriage.
Okay. So you signed up, and then where did you take your basic training at?
Fort Dix, New Jersey.
New Jersey. And how long were you there for?
Well, you're there for between 8 and 10 weeks.
About how many of you were there? Like, how many, like the new class that was going into, how many?
It's hard to say because you're divided out into so many companies. I can just tell you that is the longest bus trip you'll ever take, because you leave here, you would go to if you remember the Pick Roosevelt that burned here just a couple of years ago where people were staying. That Pitt Roosevelt was where everybody had to report to, whether you were being drafted or going in or whatever. And so you went down there, spent a night there, and then they loaded you up in buses. And then what's a 300-mile trip to Fort Dix, New Jersey is more like a 10, 12-hour trip, because they're stopping in different towns along the way. And by the time you got to basic training, you were pretty well played out, and you're getting off the bus and all these drill sergeants are just yelling and screaming at you. You're like, what did I sign up for? So
there's like 50 in your crew, or 100, or you said there's different.
Well, yeah, you're divided up into different companies.
I say your company, how many's in the company?
Probably, well, you're divided into Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta, Echo, Foxtrot. So there's 5 different platoons to one company, and there could be 50 in each one of those.
So the platoon's around 50.
Yeah. So.
Okay. So then, how long were you there?
It was 1 week of orientation, and then 9 weeks of really extensive training.
And then where did you go?
From there, you got a 1 week leave, and then those of us who had enlisted, we were to report to the fort or base where we were going to be trained for our further military service, and that's where my training came in at. Now, if you were just drafted and you were very physically fit, more than likely you were going to be a grunt soldier, sent to combat or artillery units or something like that to be trained. Those of us who enlisted for that extra year were guaranteed a school only if we completed basic training and weren't phased back, because if you thought you were going to go there and flunk basic training and hopeful that Army would kick you out, which a lot of people that were drafted tried to do, especially the hippies. And they made it quite plain that you'll be here forever. But for me, it was in my contract that if I didn't complete my basic training, they didn't have to guarantee me that school, which was a very extensive school. 44 weeks was my next bout of training.
And where was that at?
Fort Monmouth, New Jersey.
So you're still at New Jersey?
I'm still in New Jersey, which isn't very far from Fort Dix. I don't know if there's 40-mile difference between Fort Dix and Fort Monmouth, New Jersey.
So after your 44 weeks, then what?
After my 44 weeks, I should tell you a little bit about this training.
Okay.
First of all, the MOS, which is, everybody has a number that was what their military training was. My MOS was 32 F20, which is fixed siphony crypto repair. At that time, there was no other school. Anybody that survived that 44 weeks, we were the best. We had the security clearances that the president himself had.
Oh.
Okay. So.
Did you have to sign one of those non-disclosure agreements or something like that?
Oh, yeah. That's the reason why. It's been the reason I will talk to you about some of this, what I've done today, is because at the time that we got out, because of my knowledge, we were threatened that it would be the same as espionage. And, I never wanted guilty of that. That's the reason why a lot of times people would say, what'd you do when you were in there? And I'd say, well, I was just a simple little repairman. But I can tell you this about Fort Monmouth, New Jersey. It has a place called The Cage. And the first 8 weeks you go there, there's 50 people in a class. And not all of them are going to be 32F, but basically they call it basic electronics. And the purpose of that first 8 weeks was to weed out the people who didn't know anything. And it was really hard. I struggled in that 8 weeks, and I thought, I'm never going to make it to get to The Cage. And but I did pass it. And then the remaining of my 44 weeks was spent in a building called The Cage. And the reason it was called The Cage was it was a building with bars on the windows, speakers on the outside that played music. At that time, the Jackson 5 were pretty big. And I remember hearing Jackson 5 and the Carpenters and CCR, Creedence Clearwater Revival. I mean, that was played on the speakers outside, and they did that so that no one could ever hear what was going on in the classroom. When you went in for the classroom, it wasn't like going to school or college or whatever. You had a instructor. Your classes were divided into 20, okay? And so basically you started out with 50 in the basic electronics. They weeded out 30 of them in 8 weeks. That was it. They were gone. And then there was 20 of you left. And they told us in the 20 that there would only be 10 of us left. And so you always had that in the back of your mind. And they also told us that if we flunked out, the Army didn't have to guarantee us anything else other than being a grunt soldier. And if you were physically fit. And if you weren't physically fit, they said you would end up in another area like supply or being an MP or something like that. And but unfortunately, I finished in the top 10% of basic training. I had no doubt where I was going to go. I flunked out of that school. So I'm in there in this cage. You walk into this classroom. We sat down, and there's like 4 blackboards. And he puts all this information on the blackboard. And you're basically reading it absorbing it, listening to everything he's telling you, and you can't take notes because you don't have paper, you don't have pencil, and that was for 8 hours a day. As quick as you basically covered everything, then he erased all that, and then he started over again. You got 2 breaks plus lunch. They called them smoke breaks. I didn't smoke, so I just stood around. But if you weren't in the classroom, you couldn't discuss. Like, you couldn't walk outside in the hallway or outside. You could never study with a buddy. When you went back to the barracks, because we had other details to do and physical training we had to do when we weren't doing that. And so it was just very intense training. Most people say, well, you were brainwashed. And I'm like, yeah, basically I was. But you had to memorize. It was all about memorization. And so they tested us in different times. And when you came in one day for a test, you walked in, the instructor was standing at the door. He handed you a test paper and a pencil. You walked over and you took the test, and as soon as you were done with the test, you walked up front to him. He graded your test right in front of you, so you knew if you passed or failed right there. He took your pencil, and then he shredded your test, because what we were learning was that top secret, okay? And the training on that was pretty intense. I can't, I mean, I still can't talk about that. It was 3 key pieces of communication equipment that only colonels and generals could communicate with the Pentagon.
When you were in high school, did you do pretty good in education?
Yes, I was above average, only because I lived to wrestle, so I wanted to keep my grades up. But electric shop, just simple wiring and reading schematics and doing things was so simple that the teacher we had, and Sparky, we had, and everything he had for me my senior year, I did in 6 weeks. And so after that, he kept finding me more and more projects to do. So I knew I was gifted in that area.
Did you ever get to talk to him much? He was in World War II.
No, I did not. Him and I, he was impressed with me. I was not impressed with him. So I just, it was all about that.
When you guys took a smoke break, did half the people smoke?
Oh yeah, that was an age back then where guys smoked, and then
so even more than half of the people smoked.
Yeah, more than half the people smoked, and you would go outside, and when they were trying to find stuff for you to do, especially in basic training and stuff, people smoked, and we had to go around and pick up cigarette butts, and I never smoked a day in my life. I've never smoked a cigarette or smoked at all in my life, okay?
Isn't that
so you can bet I wanted to put a hurt on anybody that was making me pick up cigarette butts, okay? I'm just telling you. To this day, somebody delivered a package here the other day, and there was a cigarette butt laying out here beside the sidewalk. He can be glad I didn't see him throw that cigarette butt there, because it would have triggered a very bad memory in my mind. But getting back to the school,
the MOS.
The MOS. Basically, we started in a class of 50. They weeded out 30 of them. 20 of us went into the school. Said 10 of us would graduate, and I was number 3 in that class.
Ah.
Okay?
That fit right into you.
Yes. And so when we got our assignments, a lot of guys were going to Germany and other places, and I got orders for Vietnam. So they sent us home for 30 days. Say your hellos, goodbyes, or break up with your girlfriends, or do whatever, And then you went back, and I had to report back to Fort Monmouth. Then we were flown to Oakland, California.
So you went to New Jersey, to California,
Yep.
and then where?
And then from California on the trip over, we went by way of Alaska. We went to Alaska, was one stop, and then the next stop, it was a 26-hour flight.
So you stopped at Anchorage?
Yes, Anchorage, Alaska.
Anchorage, and then you went, and that last one was a long flight.
Yeah, the last one was a long one. It was a 26-hour flight. I remember how long that was. We landed in country in Long Binh, Vietnam.
And is that not knowing Vietnam? Is it southern Vietnam?
It's southern because Saigon was the further south, and that's where everybody. Back then, it isn't like the media is today. Back then, if there was a battle or troops were killed or captured or whatever, everything was referenced from Saigon. They would say today, in 180 mile north of Saigon, we were under attack, or this or that. They never gave the village or the town or whatever. Okay, but I was moved to Long Binh, California, or excuse me, Long Binh, Vietnam, and I spent 1 week there. And there again, they had us filling sandbags, and I'm thinking, now I just had all this training, and I'm filling sandbags, and I thought, okay, well, I'm probably doing a good thing because I need lots of sandbags. Well, half of us filled sandbags, and the other half emptied the sandbags. And it was all about the Army's way.
Keep you busy.
Keep us busy. And what they were doing was, I had a top secret clearance when I went there, but I needed one more clearance. It's called top secret crypto. So I had to wait that week while I was there till that clearance came through. Then I was shipped up to Nha Trang. And in Nha Trang, there's an Air Force base there, and then there's a base next to it. And I still remember I was 1st Signal, 73rd Battalion, and my company was the 228th. In fact, I have a custom license plate on my pickup. If you'd ever see it, I actually have the 228th custom license plate. But if you look it up, it'll always say it's an air base. Little did they know what we were doing.
Did it get under attack?
Always. We were mortared at almost 3 a.m. every day. And because I went over there in August of 1971, yes, August of 1971 when I arrived in country, and Nixon had become president in 68, and he ran that, he would get us out of that war, he would cut back in troops, and so there was a massive cutback of troops, and of course a lot of the things that protected us were pulled out first. And so the first couple of months I was there, I basically started out my day at base, and then we rode a deuce and a half. I don't know if you know what a deuce and a half is, but it carried troops. And down into the village in Nha Trang, because our communication center was in the basement of a hotel in the village. And the reason it was there rather than on base was we got mortared every day, and it was a risk that it would be hit. But in the village, they wouldn't mortar the village because during the rainy season, a lot of VC came back home. They lived in Nha Trang, okay? So if you thought all the Vietnamese you saw in Nha Trang were friendly, no, they weren't. They were the wives of the VC, because at age 14, Vietnamese have to go and serve, okay? So every kid, wherever they're serving, so they're either serving the South Vietnamese or the North Vietnamese.
You couldn't tell whether they're friendly or foe?
No, they all look the same. They all look the same. But our communication center was in the basement of this hotel. It only had one entrance. It was guarded by 2 Marines, And when I went down in there the very first time, I was totally in shock. It was 2 rooms down there, and all of our equipment and everybody's communications equipment, everybody else that had taken lesser courses, were all down there. And on top of them were these heat incendiary devices, and on top of that was a heat grenade. And I quick to ask the question, I'm like, what's with all this? And they said, well, here's the part they didn't tell you in school. If the village is overrun and they can't defend us, their alarm will sound down there where we were. There was lights, and if those go off, it's not a fire drill. You are to pull the pins on those heat grenades. Those will set off the heat incendiary devices, which will totally melt down our equipment, because we could not risk it being compromised. If that equipment got compromised, you're talking the communication of the entire country back to the Pentagon and all over the world. Okay, so I lived every day knowing that that could happen. And I said, so what's the purpose of the 2 guys where we came in at? Because they're not going to be able to do much. And they said, their only purpose, and you'll never see the same 2 Marines there any day you go down here, is the fact that they will bar the door shut so that none of you come out. Because we were that valuable, and because of our memorization, we didn't carry around books, and we didn't have the power of YouTube today where I'm just going to look up how to fix something. Everything in that equipment that I worked on, and I could fix everybody's equipment. I was that gifted. Didn't matter. If I watched them for a day or two, my equipment was working good, and I watched them for a day or two, I was like, man, that's a piece of cake. And so when Nixon was cutting back the troops, people with my MOS were the last to go, because we were told that they can be moved out, because if this equipment goes down, I know you can fix it. So, but that was rare that I spent every day of life there, because there was that was just a main hub in the Trang, and 40 mile away was another one in Cameron Bay, and several other places where the colonels and generals were positioned, and they each had one piece of my equipment, and they had to always be able to communicate. So if something went down, they put me in a chopper, and I was choppered into wherever that was. And it had to be fixed. And I didn't walk around with a bag of spare parts or an owner's manual or anything like that. Most of the time it was simple things, or if they had gotten mortared, or any type of dirt, sand, anything that got in somewhere it shouldn't have, or the temperature of the room where the equipment was kept at, I normally could fix it. And if there was something that I absolutely needed, I was impressed that they could get me that part. But the click was, I better not be wrong. The government went to all that trouble, and they brought in a new circuit board, say, for example. That circuit board had to be exchanged, and that colonel was looking over my shoulder, and it had better work. So I lived under that pressure. The other pressure I lived under was I was totally protected anytime I was not at the communications center.
Were you armed?
Yes. Always carried an M16, and I was a darn good shot too, by the way.
Good.
Expert marksman. That's what you get from Pennsylvania.
Did your helicopter rides in take fire?
Yes. Door gunners. I seen several door gunners get wounded, and we even lost one door gunner. But we weren't never in the air very long before snipers would shoot at the choppers, and then that door gunner would just cut loose I lost hearing in my left ear because the door gunner set to my left. And everybody said, well, didn't you have headphones or this or that? No, we didn't have that, So I came home from Nam, 80% loss of hearing in my left ear.
Did you graduate in 1970?
Yes.
Okay.
Graduated in 1970, went in the Army 5 days later. But I lived most of my Army life in Vietnam knowing that, okay, if I'm in the communications center and we get overrun, I'm going to die there. And if I'm being flown in somewhere to fix something and the chopper gets shot down,
I'm getting shot at.
I'm going down. And the Marine that was riding with me was to protect me to the point of capture, and if I was to survive it and we were in unfriendly, he couldn't risk me being. His orders of the day were protect me to the point of capture. So it was like, you know what that feels like? You have any idea? I lived that and breathed that for 9 months. I was over there for 9 months. I would have been there a year except for the fact that Nixon's cut back in troops actually got me out of country about 3 months early. But we were one of the last to go. And, you always hear everybody talk about the Tet Offensive in '68 where so many troops were lost and whatever. But nobody ever talks about the Easter Offensive of 1972. You should look it up, you should Google it and read about it because I was there during that, and there's no more danger.
That's when you're getting ran over.
That's when they pulled everybody out. As much just left the essentials in there. We had a job because of my equipment. It had to be dismantled, shipped out of there as quick as possible, and only I could do that because you couldn't send people without my training to do that, and you couldn't just bury it in the sand. That equipment would be, so. And the North Vietnamese, the Easter Offensive of 1972 was March of 1972. They were bombing as much as they could the North Vietnamese because they actually started sending in tanks and people to just be retaking the country. As quick as we were moving out, they were taking it over. So it got very dangerous over there. So, my last few days, I thought, am I going to make it home or not? And so, there are those who fought in combat and have their Purple Hearts, and I have such respect for them. And the one you interviewed the other day, I have such respect for him because he truly was in combat. There's not a lot of people know what I'm telling you right now because I lived and breathed this every day of my life, and knowing that if the enemy don't get me, friendly fire may if I'm at a point of where I could be captured. So it was never about the manuals or a briefcase I had or anything like that. It was the fact of the matter of it's all in his brain. And to this day, I found out just recently there's a museum that has all the equipment that everything I worked on. I'm going to go make that trip someday, but I can tell you right now, if I was to walk in there, I could fire that baby up. It's not used anymore. That's why it's a museum. It's a museum right outside of Fort Meade, Maryland. But
the 9 months you were there, what were the different weather conditions?
Well, when you got there, every day got up over 100. We had to take salt pills to help us retain the water. He sweated so much, your collars and everything were wet and with white with salt. And the hardest thing for me to understand, being, I was only 19 years old when I went to Vietnam. I'd never had a chopper ride in my entire life. And I couldn't understand how it could be over 100 degrees on the ground and you wouldn't go very high up there. And it is darn cold, and but then they had the rainy season, and it lasted 3 months.
Monsoons.
Yeah, the monsoons, and it just rained and rained and rained. And so if you can imagine walking around, it's no use. I mean, you're just going to be wet. You're just going to be wet.
You couldn't keep dry.
You couldn't keep dry. No matter what you did, you couldn't keep dry. And so it was like sweat, cook, bake, whatever, or
waterlogged for 3 months.
water that kept all the vegetation up. And then talking about the vegetation, because of all that vegetation, that's when they started spraying this Agent Orange.
And how did you get in contact with it?
Well, first of all, when I tell you I worked in the village in the Trang, I did that for most of my day, but then in the evenings you had to come back to the base, and you did about 6 hours of guard duty on the perimeter. And of course we had all this vegetation outside, and they continually sprayed that vegetation.
How did they spray it?
By chopper.
Yeah. And you were underneath, and you were getting it sprayed on you?
Oh yeah, it just come down on you.
And
it
sprayed on you?
Yeah, and they always just said, oh, don't worry about that, don't worry about this. The guys that I really felt bad for were the guys that were actually in the bush, because that was all coming down in there, in the streams and the water and things that was there, and they were filling their canteens out of that. And they gave us these purification tablets
supposedly
to put in our canteens, but that was a joke. I mean, you're still drinking that water. It still had that Agent Orange in it. Yeah. And then 2 of the areas I was flown in, Pleiku and Bamituit, were sprayed a lot. I mean, it just reeked of the Agent Orange. That was where I got the worst exposure to it. So,
was there any humor among your unit that helped you through the tough times?
Well, there may have been. Not for me. I was so focused on what I had to do. I guess that's why I wrestled in school, because I never was a team player. I was a perfectionist, so when I wrestled, I had to be the best at what I did, and the team may have lost, but I didn't want to be the one that lost or caused the team to lose. And so that was my focus the whole time I was in Vietnam, was I can fix everybody's equipment down here in this communication center. I'll be in choppered areas to fix stuff that if I don't fix it, this colonel or this general can't communicate with the Pentagon. There's people that would have been in the Trang that wouldn't even have known I was there, because I was just always on. I don't even remember sleeping much. That worked against me, because 24 hours after I came home from Vietnam, I had a grand mal seizure.
What type of seizure?
Grand mal seizure.
And what is that?
Well, I was visiting my brother in Erie, and I was just drinking a morning cup of coffee. I hadn't even been back home 24 hours, because they give you another 30 days before you have to. I still had 10 months to put in the Army when I got home, and I thought I was having a stroke and I was going to die, because the whole left side of my face started to pulsate in my mouth. I couldn't talk. I couldn't move. And I remember my brother's, he was already at work at General Electric, and she was out in the kitchen washing dishes, and I'm thinking, I'm going to die right here, and she ain't going to know what happened to me. And I threw myself forward, and I just remember concentrating on the coffee table. If I can make noise, she'll know there's something wrong with me. And I hit that coffee table, and the next thing I knew, I was in a hospital in Erie.
So you went unconscious for however long that was?
Yeah, however long that was. The bad part was the ambulance took me to Hammett Medical. And then I remember coming to, I couldn't open my eyes, but I remember a doctor seeing my dog tags. And he said, we can't touch him, he's military. So we got to send him over to the VA hospital. So I passed out again, and then the next time I woke up, I had some Indian doctor talking in my ear. I can still hear his voice because we were labeled as drug addicts and baby killers and everything else coming home from Vietnam. And all I can hear is this little voice, Melvin, what are you taking? Melvin, I need to know what drug are you on. What are you taking? And the more he said that, the more I started to become alert. I still couldn't open my eyes, but the last thing I remember was reaching up and grabbing him by the throat. Because I was just like, you're talking to a guy that never smoked a cigarette, never did any dope. The only marijuana I ever got was a secondhand smoke from guys that did. And opium and everything else that people used. I would have took a whiz test for anybody on any given day. I never worried about it. And so it just, I had anger issues. There's no doubt about it. I probably would have killed the little guy, except they must have stuck me with a needle, and I woke up, I was in restraints.
Where's the VA hospital up there?
Yeah, it's not too far from Hammett Medical Center, but it's in Erie. So.
Okay. Because there's St. Vincent and there's Hammett.
Yeah, there's a VA hospital because I spent, of my 30 days of leave, I spent the entire period of time up there.
So was it a stroke or was it a heart attack?
Or
what is that thing that you had?
A seizure is a seizure.
So it was just a seizure. It wasn't.
Yeah, it's you've seen guys that fall on the floor and they
quiver
and shaking and whatever. And for me, I would have compared it more to a stroke because it started in my face, the side of my face, and I couldn't move. I was paralyzed. I literally couldn't move.
Did you ever leave your body during that?
Not during that.
No outer body experience?
No outer body experience.
Okay.
And so that was. So I spent my entire leave up there, and then they sent me to Fort Ritchie, Maryland was my next assignment. And when I reported there, they sent me down to a hospital down there to be evaluated. And yeah, they were giving me nitroglycerin for my heart. I always had a slow heartbeat. To this day, I still have a slow heartbeat. My heartbeat, normal people is, 72 or something, or whatever. A normal heartbeat for me is 47. And so they thought I had it, so they were giving me stuff. They actually were giving me speed to speed my heart up. I couldn't handle it, and I was just like, and because I had a grand mal seizure, they wanted me to take a medical discharge, and I was too proud to do that. I'm like, I did not survive Vietnam just to take a medical discharge, and they ruled it as extreme fatigue. That's the reason I had that. And, they had me taking I probably took medication for about 3 years to prevent it. But one day I just tossed that medication. But I said, I'm finishing my days. I said, I want an honorable discharge. I want to live the rest of my life knowing I didn't take a medical discharge. To me, in my brain, a medical discharge was those who were deserving of it that were injured in battle.
Did they ever recognize your Agent Orange? Did you ever get? It took them a long time to even
Yeah,
acknowledged Agent Orange was a.
they had where you could go get tested and this and that and whatever. I'll tell you the day, if you recall, 8 years ago, I was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer.
Prostate.
Yes, prostate, and it was very aggressive. And I had tried 6 years before. When President Obama was president, they had got on this kick of calling Vietnam veterans and other veterans in for a psych evaluation and this and that, and if you wanted to be tested for Agent Orange, you could be, and whatever, and when I came up from Vietnam, I had such an attitude. I didn't darken the doors of any VA facility for 40 years. I just said, I'm not doing this. Doc Miller was my doctor. I had all the signs on my legs and stuff. He's just like, someday they're going to admit what they sprayed on you guys. My son was born with a birth defect. That there again, that's another box you could check real quick. And I said, no, I'm going to work my days. The biggest problem I had was nightmares. And back then, there was no Vietnam veteran that could ever tell you they had ever heard of what PTSD was. We didn't have a term for that. And so my way of surviving the nightmares was to drive truck and rarely sleep. So that's why I did that for 43 years.
What was it? On your truck routes, where's the farthest away you went?
Oh, I ran West Coast a lot.
You went to California.
My first 16 years, I ran New York City, Brooklyn, Bronx, all the rough areas, okay, where today people say, I don't know how you did that for so many years out that way, and I had no fear.
Have you been in most of the states in the country?
I've been in every state except Washington and Oregon.
Oh,
I've covered
pretty good.
Over 4.5 million miles of driving.
Any accidents?
One major one in 2002. I had a major accident. A truck coming at me was hauling a container, and when you haul a container fastens onto a chassis, and there's 4 big dogs on the corners that lock it in, and he had a short container on a long chassis, so they had slid it back to load it, and then they slid it back in place, and he was to lock in those dogs. Evidently he didn't do it, and something made him, was on Route 30 in Ohio, and for some reason he didn't lock it in. Something made him hit his brakes, and I was going down the road on a 2-lane road, and I saw something in the field, and I turned my head, realized it was a truck, and when I turned my head back around, here was the other half of that chassis, and I hit that chassis head on. And the chassis spun around and sliced right through my door on the truck. All it did was slit my jeans. It could have cut my legs off.
That was a miracle.
I hit the brakes, and you talk about an out-of-body experience. I can say I truly had an out-of-body experience, because as soon as I hit that chassis, I was elevated and I was watching myself wreck, and I felt something on my stomach, a sting on my stomach when I hit that chassis, and then when the wreck was over with, there's this big piece of metal from the trailer that at half of the trailer, because it was a 3-axle chassis, so I hit it head on and it spun around and it sliced through the door. It totally caved in, pushed the steering wheel in, pinned me against the seat, and then all the freight I had in my trailer came all the way through the sleeper and was pushing in the seat the other way. And I just was there for, seemed like an eternity, till the ambulance people came, and it took them 40 minutes to cut me out.
So, how long were you out of your body, do you think? Like, you were up there and there was no pain or anything. You're just kind of looking down.
Well, when I felt a little like a sting on my stomach. That's all I ever felt the whole time. That's the only thing I ever felt. And as soon as the rig came to a stop, I was back in my body.
So
I was back in my body, and then I realized I'm in trouble here, you know. And I remember the steering wheel. I could hardly breathe. Guys had tilt steering wheels and stuff, but I never ever tilted my steering wheel and laid back in the seat. I always just left it up in this position, and the doctors tell me that's what saved my life, and I always say no, it was God that saved my life, because I said that to this day I still carry this little lump right here from that steering wheel that pushed me, right, and it had me pinned tight to the seat, and had I had to tilt it back, it would have totally collapsed my whole frame. If you can't expand your frame, you're going to suffocate. And all this freight's laying in my bunk and on the back of the chassis of the truck, and everything was totaled.
Did you spend any time in the hospital?
Actually, believe it or not, I only spent 24 hours in the hospital. One day. And they assessed me and couldn't believe I had no injuries other than I looked like a woman who was pregnant, because my stomach was so swollen from the shot I took from the steering wheel, you know.
How did you get cured from prostate cancer?
I am not cured from it. A lot of people think that I am, but I am not.
Have you ever taken ivermectin?
Ever what?
Ivermectin.
Evidently I haven't, because I don't know what that is. It's kind of like a natural cure. It was in 2015 it got the Nobel Prize for a good medicine. Yeah, well, it's a form of, I would assume, a form of an enzalutamide. It would be my guess, but here's been my walk with my cancer. I was diagnosed in I knew I had something going on at age 60, and I had a biopsy done, and they just didn't find it. It's not an exact science, these biopsies for your prostate. And so 6 years later, my PSA numbers were climbing and just off the charts, and the Army took me in and said, we're going to do one, because they had denied me everything. I couldn't get benefits, nothing. It was just, you know, it's hard for me to talk about that part of it, because I still have issues.
What's your PSAs now?
Currently it's at 1.
Oh, so that's pretty about cured.
Yeah,
You know,
well,
they had got up to 12.
I would love to tell you I'm cured, but if I wasn't on the medication that I'm on right now, it would.
Did it get up to 12 or 14, or do you remember what your highest was?
In the beginning?
Well,
in the beginning, I was in the 20s going.
20s.
Yeah. And then
you're like a year alive.
In 2017, when I was diagnosed in 2017, when I was 66 years old, I was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, and they told me I probably wouldn't live a couple of years because my cancer was already outside my prostate. I had a mass in my left pelvis area, and I had a mass near my aorta, and it was in my lymph nodes. And they said, they told me I wasn't a candidate for surgery. They didn't want to open me up, and they said we're going to do radiation, and I went through the whole protocol, got tattooed and everything for radiation, and before they started the radiation, another doctor came in and said, we can't do it because where this mass is in your aorta, near your aorta, will kill you.
Kill you by your heart.
So I said, okay, so where do we go from here? And they said, well, the only thing left is chemo, and you have to get this hormone shot that kills all the testosterone, because testosterone feeds prostate cancer. And so they said, no matter what, you'll get this shot every 3 months for the rest of your life. And I don't like what it does to me. Just take a man and strip him of his testosterone. For me, who was a very manly man, it was hard for me to deal with. And of course, the chemo was 6 treatments, 6 weeks apart, and it gave me neuropathy in my feet and legs so bad that I still struggle every night when the sun goes down. I don't care what kind of medication you take, the neuropathy will get the better of you. And but the shots, the hormone shots, I can't. It's just, this is me every day, you know. But it's an amazing thing that they told me. They said, you know, get your affairs in order, which I did. I did a lot of things. I retired. It forced me into retiring, which I was 67. I was good to retire anyways. And we did a lot of praying, a lot of people praying for me, and they said all we can do is slow it down. And I said, well, let's hope we slow it down a lot. So I went through that chemo, still got that, and we could never get down to undetectable. Like the lowest I could get was 2.5 or something, and they said that's probably as good as it's going to get until it starts to go back up. Well, 2 years ago, this past February, it started to get back up, and it went up to 14.
Oh boy.
And but the FDA, I'm taking it's called an enzalutamide. There's many forms. It has many different names. There's just many different names for it, but it works with the hormone shot, and it has a way of coating the cancer cells. It doesn't eliminate them, but it has a way of coating the cancer cells so they can't spread to other cells. And I'm like, it's like a clinical trial. There was no clinical trials. There still isn't no clinical trial for my type of cancer. Of them trying immunotherapy. There's no immunotherapy for my cancer. And so I said, okay, fine, I'll try this. And for the first year of doing that, it made me so sick. I thought, I'm never going to get through this enzalutamide. And then the body is an amazing thing. God has created such a amazing work of art that after a year of taking it, my body adapted. My PSA dropped down to undetectable, and it had never been to undetectable before. I still have those 2 masses, but they've never gotten any bigger. And they, as far as the lymph nodes go, it can move around anywhere. So every time you get a new ache or pain, you're thinking, has it spread here, spread there? A lot of the numbers I get, they've done spinal taps, and they have me on all these medications for osteoporosis and taking calcium and everything else. And I'm just beefed up on it. But I'm still here 8 years later. So, but that made me eligible for VA benefits, because from the day I got diagnosed, they came around, and that's when they took a hard look at everywhere I'd been in Vietnam, and they said, we're going to take care of you. And so I've never paid a dime for any medical care through all this.
Which VA do you go to?
Well, my primary care is in Butler, but all cancer treatments is done in Pittsburgh, VA. Yeah, Butler used to have a really good old-fashioned hospital. It's more of an old it's an administrative building, whatever, and they built this brand new facility on Duffy Road, and but it's basically just a clinic. So there's a clinic in Katanning down at Franklin Plaza, and there's this one here is a really nice hospital. It was built to be a hospital, but for some reason it's just like all my meds come from Butler. My primary care is in Butler. They can do X-ray, glasses, things like that. But you get into anything like a heart surgery or cancer treatment, like for me, you're going to go to the VA hospital in Pittsburgh. So
When you went to your honor flight to D.C., what was that experience like?
I did not go.
You did not make it.
I did not go. It was my choice. It was my choice. I'll tell you, it's not that I don't want to go. In fact, I have seen the Vietnam War, the mobile one, because I have escorted it around when I used to ride motorcycle. On 3 occasions, I had the privilege of escorting the Vietnam Wall around places. I went to be at the D.C., on our Washington trips when we were seniors. But my brother, who was deferred, Al, a year and two years older than me, he later, after the Vietnam War, he went into the Army when his hand was healed, and he took the exact same MOS as I did. It was just like he knew how rare that this MOS is, and he wanted to do it just to say he did it, because he was gifted, same as me.
And he made it through the whole...
He made it through the whole school, and he spent his entire 3 years working in the Washington, D.C. area. And then after he got out, he got a job working in the area. And when he was 37 years old, he was murdered in Washington, D.C. So
how did knife, gun?
It was 2 fellas that, they plant trees along sidewalks, and he had walked out of a bar 1 or 2 in the morning, and it was right on D Street in Washington, D.C. And it was on Memorial Weekend. I have a bad time on Memorial Weekends. It was on Memorial Weekend, and he was escorting. He had been married several times. He just different than me. Jody and I will be celebrating 51 years on the 12th of this month. But he had been married several times, and he was escorting his latest outside of a bar, and walked over to the car, and 2 fellas jumped out from behind a tree. One pushed him against the car, and the other was rummaging through her purse. And the gun went off. He dropped straight dead right there on the spot. The other one took off running, and they never got them. Never knew nothing. So I have an attitude about Washington, D.C. It's hard for me to. And as much as the guys try and encourage me to go to the honor flight and whatever, it's just like I can't do it. I can't do it. I don't know Washington, D.C. anything. It's tough. It's tough.
Is there any advice you give someone about going to service or from your time in the military?
I think everybody should have to go. I look at how wimpy young folks are today and how they're coddled. This is my personal opinion. It's not based on science or anything else. It's just like we spend too much time coddling our kids, and when we lived in the age of draft, we knew we were going to get drafted or enlist and make something of yourself and learn something while you're in there. But nowadays they can join, and if they don't like it, they can get out. I don't understand that. The drill sergeants aren't allowed to touch them. They're so restricted what they can do, and I'm like, but I still have nothing but respect. And even though my own son did not go in the Army, I was the first in my family to go. My brother Al went, my brother Larry went, and my sister she did 6 years of reserve, enlisted reserve. And then I have a grandson currently that's a first lieutenant stationed in in Fort Hood, Texas, and we just saw him over Easter here, and he's going to be deployed Lafayette in May. He's leaving in May for that. So we were just relieved that he wasn't being deployed to Iran. So.
Well, Mel, I appreciate you sharing what you did, and thank you. And it'll be on YouTube and Facebook under Bob Gourley's Truth Seekers. So thank you.
I hope I didn't ramble too much. It's us old guys, you wind us up, we got to tell her like it is.
I thought you did excellent. So thank you.